I really want to tweak my bike a bit, so I'm wondering, should I change these spacers? It's only 5 millimeters, so does it really matter? So how will I know? Hi everyone, this is Tal from Ridebox. In this video, we're gonna talk a little bit about bike geometry and also the things that you can change and do they really matter. You'll often hear riders or maybe your mechanic talking about very small changes you can do to your bike, like raising the bar, changing the roll, or maybe adjusting the angle of the seat. So usually this will look like really small stuff, and it's kind of hard to figure out what changes are going to be good for us or maybe less helpful. So first I want to talk about the geometry of the bike itself, the frame, and that's actually something we can't really change once we've purchased the bike. In the second part, we'll talk a little bit about the adjustments that you can make yourself and how to understand the effect that they will have on your ride. Speaking about bike geometry or the frame angles, you've probably heard stuff like head angle, seat tube angle, wheelbase, chainstay length, all those numbers that add up to be your bike. There's something that's really important to understand. There isn't a single number or an angle on the bike frame that's going to decide how the bike will behave. We often hear that riders are a little bit obsessed with maybe the chainstay length or the head tube angle by half a degree or a few millimeters. Now, it's not that it doesn't matter, but at the end of it, the qualities and the character of the bike is the sum of all its numbers. If you want to dive deeper into understanding bike geometry and setting up your bike correctly, you need to feel what it does. So here's something that you have to be a little bit honest with yourself about and also understand. The more skilled you are, the better you can feel small changes. If you're a beginner, what we want to do is adjust and set up the bike to a good baseline. That's all you need. The more skilled you get, the faster you go on the trail and the harder you're going to push the bike, you will be able to feel smaller, more minute changes. So if you're a beginner and you're curious about bike setup and geometry, it's great. But make sure you get your skills up there before you go into the small details. And of course, you can use our online coaching for that. The first and most important thing about bike geometry is picking the correct size for you. Most manufacturers have a table with recommendations of which size is correct for your height. You'll often find yourself somewhere in between sizes, maybe thinking about whether to take a medium or a large. So let's talk about the differences. For riding trails, the main thing that's interesting to us is how long the bike is. The longer the bike is, it will be more stable in high speed. And the shorter it is, we will have a more agile bike. So if you're in between sizes, it's really up to you to decide which qualities you prefer. For beginner to intermediate level, I personally recommend the shorter bike, so it's more playful and easier to move around. And the faster you go, the more advanced you get, you can start thinking about a longer bike. The geometry information that will tell you how long the bike is will be, of course, the wheelbase, the reach, and the top tube. You will usually see these numbers increase or decrease between sizes by around 20 millimeters per size. Once you chose your size and you have your frame, those numbers are sort of set. You do have some frames that have more adjustments, but most frames are set with their geometry, and now you can play with some other adjustments, such as the seat, the handlebar, and we'll go into them now. The reason I had this dilemma at the first part of the video about these 5 millimeter spacers is that these adjustments are sometimes very small, and it almost seems like it doesn't matter at all, but actually they do have an impact on our ride. So here's a little trick in how to imagine or understand these changes. So back to our spacers. If I want to lift or lower the stem and the handlebar by 5 millimeters, how will I understand what it's going to do? So if you want to understand the small stuff, you have to think big. We're going to take our small change and imagine what would happen to the bike or to us if we make a massive change out of it. For example, handlebar height. My handlebar is attached to my bike, so I need something else. All right, this will do. So we're going to imagine what happens to us or the bike as we raise or lower the handlebar. So as we take our handlebar to a higher position, we're going to get a more upright position on our body, and that might feel comfortable. As the handlebar gets lower, we're going to get a lower position, which might feel less comfortable. But is comfort the only thing we want of our bike? Not always. We usually want to think about our bike setup as a compromise between comfort and performance. So higher is more comfortable than lower. What happens with performance? Let's think about moving the bike from side to side. If I have a really high monkey bar style thing, now if I want to lean the bike, I have to do this really big motion. It's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to be really slow to move the bike from side to side. If I have a very low bar, every small movement on the bar is going to tilt or lean the bike from side to side. So I have a much quicker response. So by using a very simple tool, our fake handlebar, which we don't need anymore, and a little bit of imagination, we can understand how small changes in geometry affect us. Back to the real bike. Now you understand what a change in handlebar height does. So will a 5mm difference do the same change? Yes. Just smaller steps and in a more subtle way. Some riders are more sensitive to bike setup and others adapt easily to just about any bike. But if you want to change your setup and understand what those small changes do, think big and then really take the time to play with it and go through some trial and error. The handlebar height or those spacers on the steerer tube, that's just one example of stuff that you can adjust. But we have the handlebar height, the handlebar roll, we can adjust the seat height and the seat angle as well as its position forward or backward. And of course we can adjust tire pressure and suspension. If you want to get more tips and advice about bike setup and also about riding skills, don't forget to subscribe. If you have any questions, write it down in the comments below and check out our full bike setup course at ridebox.bike.